So, no update this morning because I got a lot going on. But I did want to have a bit of a rant while I'm kind of heading to my destination here. The inevitable thing that takes place when the Ukrainians are successful, and this happened when the Russians lost the initial offensive into Kharkiv, when the Russians lost the counteroffensive in Kharkiv and now Lyman, and that's being pushed. And now we're seeing successes of Ukraine in Kherson. Inevitably what happens is the bots, the Russian supporters, the cubicle farms full of commenters that come to posts like mine to make absolutely idiotic claims about what is really happening, those people go quiet. And whether they go quiet because they're being told to go quiet, or they're going quiet because the normal flow of publications from the Kremlin that they either purposefully or ignorantly believe as the true story, though that flow stops. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the flow of information from the Russian propaganda machine pause. And inevitably when they do this, it's because they're trying to reconfigure the message and change it. Well, even internally, Russia right now is struggling with messaging, and what it looks like is they're trying to switch to victimhood and this scared raccoon mentality, where they are going to be very dangerous, is what I keep hearing. They're so dangerous because they're being backed into a corner. I'm hearing it from people in our own leadership in the United States and in the West, people that had connections or ties to the Department of Defense at one time. And the bottom line is, even if they're right, we can't live like that. We can't operate that a Russian bully is acceptable and we will cave every single time they point to their nukes. And I've talked about this. The reality is Russia's not backed into a corner. They have created the corner, and then they're telling us that they're being backed into this corner. I could understand if they were under siege in Moscow, or even if Ukraine had won this current fight and was like, fuck it, Russia's really weak, let's go and try to take some Russian territory, or even let's go and take Moscow or hit Moscow. That's not going to happen, but I could see that even in that case. But we have Western politicians, Western media, Western thinkers on this thing saying that Russia's being backed into a corner. This is just like the red lines in Russia. Don't want to cross the Russian red lines? Go fuck yourself. We cross them every single time because we do not cave to bullies and warmongers like this. This is the fucking United States. This is the fucking West. This is the most powerful alliance of nations in the history of the world, and we will not cave. And I'm sick and tired of hearing cowards on TikTok, on the news, talk about how they're afraid of a potential Russian desperation move with their nuclear weapons. That's not the play. They're not desperate. Their country is still perfectly intact. What you're essentially saying is that Russia can use nukes as leverage to take whatever they want. Because I can tell you right now, they will not stop in Ukraine, period. They will not stop. They won't stop with the Donbass. If they realize that using nukes as leverage is successful, they will do that until the entire USSR is reconstituted and more. Because their calculus, the Russian calculus, will be, well, if they won't back up the Donbass and they back down, let's escalate. Let's take the entirety of Ukraine. Oh, well, if they won't back up Ukraine, let's escalate. Let's move in and take all of Georgia and all of Moldova. Oh, if they won't if they won't back down, let's continue to escalate. And then we're looking at a Russian invasion into Romania, a NATO country, in which we then really have to seriously consider whether we're going to be cowards and let their nukes drive our behavior. That is what will happen. Russia will continue if they find the successful button to push, the successful nuke threat button. And if we back down, as many of these, I don't know, I think some of them are just stupid, but some of them are likely supporters of, for instance, like Scott Ritter, who somehow filleted his way to general officer during the easiest period of warfare in American history, gets on the equally fuckboy Tucker Carlson and talks about how Russia is so immensely strong and they're just faking it or something. There's just so many, and then Russia uses that. These people, notice how Scott Ritter has gone quiet. He's waiting for his messaging. And it's not necessarily he's waiting directly, it's waiting for the justification articles that he fucking Googles to come out so he can read and go, oh, okay, this is the new reason why Russia's failing. And then he goes to the media with his general officer status, which is not deserved because I fucking know more than him. He goes on these news organizations and talks about why Russia's like actually the best country in the world, and they're just like failing for X, Y, and Z. And now the narrative isn't necessarily that, it's they're backed into a corner. We shouldn't do these types of things. The number of nukes Russia would need to counter any kind of to win doesn't exist. Russia can't win, period. They cannot defeat the West. They can only defeat everyone, including themselves. That's the bottom line. And we cannot operate in this world where we allow Russia to say, fuck it, if you don't let us have these states in Ukraine, we'll destroy the world. That's not us. When did we become so fucking cowardly? I cannot even fathom what it would have been like if we would have used that in any other time. Because there were weapons of mass destruction. It just wasn't nuclear, but there were biological, there were chemical weapons. Could you have imagined if the United States was like, oh, we're not getting involved in Germany, they could gas some people. And granted, the connotation isn't necessarily as bad, but make no mistake, dropping large amounts of the terrible chemical and biological weaponry that were created in U.S. cities would have been quite devastating. But no, we didn't. We looked at him square in the fucking face and hit him in the mouth and said, you can't do that shit because it's evil. And we fight evil. But apparently there's a swath of population, and maybe there was back then, and I'm pretty sure there was, but I guess they weren't as vocal or didn't have the platforming to do it. Or they were just shamed into quietly hoping that no one dies. Yeah, I wish that was the case. I wish we lived in a utopian, perfect world, but we don't. So at some point, the righteous side, the one that fights the bully, has to go and put a gun to the bully's head, and if necessary, pull the trigger. I just don't know if the U.S. and its allies have the stomach for that type of shit anymore, and it's really disappointing. Oh, by the way, back on Scott Ritter, don't fucking post me in that shit, because that dude's a fucking pedophile. I don't tolerate that shit either. When you're like, look at what Scott Ritter said, you're like, look at this dude who exposed himself to children said. That's what your opinion is based in. I just wanted to clear that up in case there was a question there.